undoubtedly have to pass through. In this self
Mr. Chairman and friends, I'm very glad to be with you again today of the Labour Party. We have gone through a great struggle in the last 5 years, and no constituency has suffered worse than this one has. And one only has to look around to see the enormous task that lies ahead of us in trying to grapple with the problems affecting the masses of the people in this country. And having gone into the problem more closely again, I've come to the conclusion that the only way to deal with this problem is to do the house properly, repair it at once, and then let the state settle the problems between the landlord and the war damage, and not leave the tenant to be the victim of incompleted and uncompleted repairs. If that's done, this job can be got on with much quicker than it is at the present moment. The cost-plus system and the other methods that have been adopted by Mr. Duncan Sands seems to me to likely to hang on the job for a very long time. That if land is dear in the towns, and that is the argument always advanced, that land is so dear that you cannot rebuild where you knock down slums and the rest of it to the extent you ought to. Well, my view is that the state should buy the land, let it to the local authority at the same price that you would do if you went 20 miles out, rebuild and rehouse the people where they are, near their work, save this enormous cost of transport, crowded trains and crowded buses, and put the additional costs that land involves you onto a national charge to be borne by the state, just like you would anything else. Now, the other thing men and women worry about is the question of full employment. I notice in today's Daily Express another little attack on me by one of Beaverbrook's friends, and they say to me that I'm the fellow responsible for shortage of food, shortage of houses, shortage of boots, shortage of everything. I think it's most amusing. I suppose it was me responsible for having to build the Air Force the size it was, and it was me responsible for having to make an army as big as it was. And it's me responsible for the failure of the negotiations in America recently by Colonel Llewellyn and Mr. Littleton to get more food for our people. Well, I wasn't there, I was here, and I had nothing to do with it. At full employment, the standard of living rises. And if you've got anything up from 1.5 million to 2 million unemployed, then the people who are suffering, and I worked this out when I was at the Ministry of Labour, the number of people who are actually affected by that is nearly 10 million. Because all you men know, and women, it's not the same men all the time. If you've got a couple of million signing on at the unemployment exchanges, there's a huge turnover of labor going on all the time, and the result is you've got an overwhelming majority of the working people actually below the poverty line. And if you take out of an annual income 3, 4, 5, or 6 weeks unemployment in a year, then that makes a lot of difference to the standard of life. We working people in the past have counted our wages in the hour or the week. I hope in future we'll devise a system that our wages will be based on the year, in order that our full employment policy will mean an annual income, because people have to live 52 weeks in the year anyway. And having to live 52 weeks in the year, it isn't much good telling me I get so much a week if I only get it for 26 and have to manage the best I can on the other 26. I don't think that's a very helpful proposition at all. And we are set to take up the slack, of which there's always plenty to do. Any nation in the readjustment and the keeping itself up to date all the time has plenty to do to cover the cycles of trade, and to seek your votes on July the 5th for not only myself but for the policy. This is a thing which they always make a mystery. It does involve the proper handling of your taxation and the proper handling of your monetary policy. What happens now? the bankers can come round to any little or big firm, and if there's an overdraft, or if they're working on an overdraft, and they want to create unemployment, they just say no more for you, or we call in what is now outstanding. The poor employer then has to look round and immediately cut down. And it's quite easy for the Bank of England in the city to produce unemployment in a country very quickly. And it's our determination, when we talk about control of the banks and control of the money system, we are not going to let a few men in the city produce unemployment as they've hitherto done. We will not allow it. Engage the conferences as a trade union leader, knowing full well that the people in the conference has no more power to settle than I've had to settle. Therefore, that interference with a steady, normal, rational flow of British employment by financiers, we are determined to stop, and stop for all time. And I ask the people who value their lives and security to vote for me, because they will tell you they'll throw all the kind of mud they can. They'll tell you we're going to steal your savings. I remember being in the 1931 election when the unemployed voted against me in case I stole the pound they never had. But they frightened everybody with this business. Now, friends, savings is very important. It's the nest egg. It's what people look for the rainy day, the old age. And one thing by control that I have mentioned, we're determined also to prevent, if we possibly can, what is called inflation. The way your savings is destroyed is not by somebody taking them. It is really by the method of rising prices. Your wives and others go to the shop, and what she bought for £1 last week becomes 24 shillings or 23 shillings next week. But her salary or wage income don't rise with it. The result is, with steadily rising prices, most of which is done by speculation, then you find steadily the value of your money decreasing. The poverty that harried us and worried us in the 20 years before the war. Now, just before you go in,
anything real for the seafarers of this country. For years,
which used to lead to depression and all the other troubles. Now, lastly,
the same direction as they have been in the coalition, both in the matter of reformatome and in the